Yeah, welcome to another episode of the Racer X Exhaust Podcast. Jason Weigandt here. It's brought to you by Yoshimura. You got the RS12 exhaust systems looking good. A surprisingly smooth debut for the 2021 Honda boys. We expected this to be a struggle for a couple of reasons. New generation models, always a little bit tough, and I was anticipating big time that someone was going to go to Houston and then say, oh my gosh, all the settings I thought that worked in the offseason aren't working, and now I don't have the factory test track to go to because I'm stuck in Texas. That kind of did happen to some riders, but not actually the Honda guys. And I also know that they were struggling with some production back issues, COVID holding things up. It was a bit of a scramble for Brayton, Freese, Sexton, and Roxon, who are the four riders on those bikes, to get everything dialed, so much so that the Moto Concepts team, the rest of their riders, Bloss and Tickle, they're not even on 2021 Hondas. They're riding 2020. So with all that evidence, I just thought there might be a problem. But no, the Honda bikes, it's been very good. Chase Sexton crashed out, but he was dynamite, lightning fast before then. I don't think that was a bike issue causing the crash. And Roxon is the points leader. More on that in a second. And Justin Brayton, what can you say? A podium. I'm totally biased. Anyway, they have RS12 exhaust systems on the bikes of Roxon and Sexton. Got those things dialed in. A little head start on the development with the Yoshimura and the new Honda because they developed the exhaust system for the Works edition of that bike that you could buy in your dealership. And the RS12 exhaust is actually different but similar. So go to yoshimura-rd.com if you're interested in one of those new Hondas. They've got the exhaust system for you. So a little different today on the show. I'm just going to talk about Houston. I went there, all three events, took 10 days. Unfortunately, I had to share a house with Mathis and JT, and then just when the mood was really bad, Phil Nicoletti shows up. Honestly, man, it was kind of a neat experience. I don't want to do it very often, 10 days to cover 3 races, and the fact that you cannot interact in person with the riders and teams. It's a lot of time just sitting in front of a computer when you could do that at home. If we had 10 days on an island like this, like Supercross Island, and I could go and talk to the people in person and meet up with people, maybe they find a track to ride during the week, go to lunch or get coffee or whatever, bro down and learn things. As a journalist, that would be fantastic. Unfortunately, we're given these 10 days, we're all in the same city, but the only people I'm allowed to interact with really was Mathis. That's it, because we were in the media bubble. And JT, because he was staying in our house, but we weren't allowed to go anywhere near the riders and teams. Now, hopefully, 10 months into this pandemic, you're not flipping out that much. I'll explain why we had to stay away. It's this simple. The riders, everyone that goes in, the riders, most importantly, have to test for COVID every 7 days. And if you test positive, you're out. And obviously, everyone is deathly afraid that one of these riders is going to test positive and then not be able to race and thus ruin their season. So all you can do is try to just reduce the amount of people that they come in contact with. And Dave Prater from Feld told us in the media a week before Houston, please do not be the one that infects one of these riders and ends their season. So if you want to interact, do it on the phone, do it over Zoom, but do not do it in person. And they took those rules seriously. They were really watching closely at Houston 1. And if you did not take it seriously, you're given a warning. And I heard people could be sent home if they don't follow the rules. That includes, whoever's over there in the pits for a team. You got to mind your P's and Q's because they do not want someone to test positive because then they're not going to race. And that's the end of their season. If a rider does on a Friday, they're not racing on a Saturday, and that would be a disaster. So with that caveat, I was living on Supercross Island. I wasn't able to talk to people in person, but absolutely there was a lot of texting, a lot of calling. I will commend Feld for setting up a lot of press conference calls for us to be on before and after each race, and then they even picked a random group of riders in between to talk to some 250 guys, for example, that weren't on the podium, and some 450 guys that weren't on the podium. So I'll tell you on this episode what it was like, the Houston experience, and then what we saw on the track. I'll give you some takes, and hopefully you can listen before we get to round 4, a quick chance to catch our breath without a weekday race here, and then we go to Indianapolis. So the racing, here is my theory. This is awesome, but I'm a little bit worried. if you look at the numbers, we had 8 podium finishers out of the 9 podium spots available. That was spectacular. If you look at round 2, just for example, there were so many guys that can say, man, I've got the speed. Dylan Ferrandis, spectacular. Late, he finishes second. Zach Osborne was running down Eli Tomac for a while. He crashes. He ends up 10th, but he was very fast. Chase Sexton, maybe the fastest of all. He was leading. He was pulling away. He crashed out, but he's got to be confident. Adam Cianciarulo looking good. He crashed out of that one. Eventually returned for 12th, but he was good in the other 2 rounds. A lot of riders that have something to be encouraged by. Malcolm Stewart, really solid. Brayton with that podium. You know he's smiling about that. Ken Roczen, the points leader. It's going about as well as you could expect. He didn't win all 3 races, but he was up front every time. Justin Barcia, it has been a renaissance. I know that you can look on paper and say he won the first round, that he didn't win the next 2. It's the same thing he does every year. But he was fast, man. He was so good at round 3. I think he was every bit as good as Webb and Roczen, who are up front. They just started ahead of him. This, so far, has been a better Barcia than what we've seen the last few years. But again, it's all on Houston dirt. It could change. We'll see. But I just named, 8, 9 guys that have reason to be excited about things. And I know we're going to hear more from, say, Marvin Musquin soon. Aaron Plessinger, I think, has the potential to really break out. So you put all these names together, and this is great. This is parity. Again, 8 different podium riders, 3 different winners. But, and this is a big but, and as P.B. Herman once said, everyone has a big but. Here is what we're worried about. Eventually, every season, the cream rises to the top. We always start out with wildness at the first couple of rounds. I mean, Roczen and Tomac were way off at Anaheim 1 last year, and it wasn't long before they became the top 2 guys and were basically settling the championship privately between them. In 2019, Cooper Webb was not good at all in the first 2 rounds. I think it was 5th and 9th, and our winners were Barcia and Baggett. That is not at all an indicator of how the 2019 season would actually play out. So we have to be careful over getting too excited. I know at the beginning of the year it seems impossible that the parity that you see could go away. You hear how capable these guys are, you listen to the names, you see how well they've ridden, and it seems like we would have 10 guys that could win any race all year, but it never actually goes that way. And I feel like we're a few cracks in the foundation. Look, the race winners, Barcia, he's become a round 1 specialist, even though he doesn't want to be known as that. He is. So Barcia winning round 1, wild and crazy, but I don't know if we can consider that shocking, just because he's done it before, right? And then winner of round 2 is Eli Tomac, last year's champ. Winner of round 3 is Cooper Webb, the previous year's champ. Could have been Ken Roczen, who has been as good as anyone the last couple of years. The sharp end of the field has been the same old guys. Now, I don't know if that's where we're going, but that's where we have gone the last few seasons, where you look back, you're at, say, round 10, and then you look back to those first couple of crazy rounds, and you're like, yeah, it was actually starting to shape up to be just 2 or 3 riders that could win the title the whole time. We just didn't know it yet. So that's what I'm worried about. And the biggest worry, if you're one of these guys in this field, is Cooper Webb. They had the dude on the ropes. It was not good at the opening round. He was going to finish 10th. He was a 10th place guy. He started 10th. He was running 10th. The only reason he moved up is because at the end, Jason Anderson put on an epic fade, and Webb moved to 9th. Round 2 was okay, but we didn't really see good riding from Webb. It was just kind of his grit and his smarts, and he managed to grind out a 4th. But they got it fixed at round 3. I don't think he would have beat Roczen if Roczen hadn't been held up by Dean Wilson, but it was much more of the Cooper Webb we're used to seeing. And I feel like when you get a rider who you know is a contender, and then they ride about as well as they normally do, that's when you just say, all right, he's good. He's going to be in it all year, and it's up to someone else to match that. And for the most part, Webb is not, there have been very few that have been able to match him the last few years. You really don't see a changing of the guard if the previous guard doesn't let their guard down. And I don't think Webb has, but it looked that way at the first 2 rounds. Him getting that win, that is dangerous for everyone else. Him getting the bike set up dialed is dangerous for everyone else. We did hear during this Houston swing that Webb did have to miss a little bit of time fairly late in the offseason. That back injury was starting to flare up. They had to back him down. And then KTM was working on this new air shock. They had an air shock a couple years ago. You might remember it deflating on Ryan Dungey on the starting line. Supposedly that is a totally different design that they're running now. So they had this air shock, and I think Webb thought they had it dialed. Then they went to Houston, and they didn't, and they had to do some changes, and he talked quite a bit about just saying to the team by round 3, just give me something, and I'll try to make it work. And that was the difference between the subpar Cooper Webb at the first 2 rounds and round 3. Now we're going to a different track, different dirt. Maybe he'll be off again, but you've got to figure with the win, they're getting back inside the window. And after all of this, after starting the season a little slow, and the bike being off, and the back injury flaring up, and slowing down his prep, and all this, Webb is 1 point behind Roczen. 1 point. So that's a little dangerous. Anytime one of the contenders is solid, that's scary for everyone else. Now, Roczen has been very good as well, but we always have the caveat with Roczen, will he feel good in all 17 rounds? That's the Mathis theory, that he's going to be good 14 or 15 times, and there's going to be a few weekends or weekdays where he's just not going to feel right physically, and those 2 or 3 bad races are going to cost him a shot at the title. We haven't seen that yet. He was very good at all 3 races, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, Tomac, he did win a race. That's good. But 13-1-5 finishes. This was not quite the normal Tomac level. Even the race win. Osborne was catching him for a while at round 2, and Ferrandis was catching him late. You just don't see that. If Eli's having a bad night, it goes bad pretty quickly. You don't see him have the lead and then someone start to cut him down in the last 5 minutes. That virtually never happens, but it was happening. So even though he won, it was in an un-Tomac way where he got a start, he didn't crash, and he managed the race. That's like a Ryan Dungey, Chad Reed style way of winning. That's not normally what we see from Tomac. So I feel that win was a bit circumstantial, and it was not enough to stamp 2021 Tomac is just as good as 2020 Tomac. We're still waiting. And the real litmus test was he got trounced by Barcia at round 3. Barcia had to get around him when he fell, and he did, and he pulled back away. Barcia and Tomac have raced each other about as much as any 2 riders have ever raced each other. Like the amount of times that they have been on the same gate together, they raced as amateurs, 250 riders, 450 riders. They've come through the ranks. How many times has Tomac gotten the better of Barcia? 90% of the time? So when Barcia has his way with him, it's still, okay, we don't have the full Eli Tomac yet, or maybe we're not going to get it. You never know. I think Webb proved, okay, I'm 2020 level, Webb, and we're waiting for Tomac to show that. Roczen has been very good, but you always have to worry about his health. So I just think it's dangerous that Cooper Webb got this confidence and this close in points with a bad start to the season. That's a dangerous point. But I hope the parity continues. And somewhat obscuring it is the frustration. Roczen ends up losing 4 points with a red cross flag violation at round 2. I said the 4 points is bad, but very rarely does this title come down to 4 points. But now it's going to be more because I don't think Roczen was going to get passed by Webb. Webb is a last lap master, but I don't think he was quite close enough to make it happen at round 3. And then Dean Wilson didn't move out of Ken's way, and that absolutely opened the door for Webb to catch him. That's not just 3 points that Roczen lost by not winning the event. Remember, it's also 3 points gained for Webb. So think about this. Webb is 1 point behind Roczen right now. 1 point. Should have lost 3 points to Roczen. Instead, he gained 3 points on Roczen. So that's a 6-point swing right there. And then Roczen lost 4 points with the red cross. Between Webb and Roczen alone, with those 2 incidents, the red cross penalty and the Dean Wilson getting in the way, between those 2 riders, that is a 10-point swing. That is the difference between Webb being 11 points down after 3 rounds, which is a lot of points down after just 3 races, and now being 1 point down. And that has to be so frustrating for Roczen. And it's really putting him to the test because what I noticed from Roczen coming into the season and some of the press conferences that they held and some of the things he said on preseason shows and then even the way he acted after round 1, he has done a lot of work to try to level himself off mentally. Now, Ken Roczen was one of these guys that had so much confidence. He was so outspoken. He was so brash. I don't think he ever thought that he would need to do that. I think Ken was so confident in himself that he felt he could tackle any obstacle in front of him head on. And for a while, there weren't a lot of obstacles, and he was very successful in the sport. So no reason to think that of course, he could get through it. He's got a lot of talent. He's probably going to win a bunch of titles and races. of course he can handle anything thrown his way. What he probably didn't anticipate is that, man, life has been rough on Kenny the last few years. Of course, we have the horrible arm injury, and then the arm injury the next year, and then all the physical issues that he's dealt with since then. That's tough enough. Don't forget, off the track, his brother-in-law, who is his trainer, Blake Savage, was paralyzed while riding with Kenny a couple of years ago. Blake is an awesome dude. He's still around. He's still his trainer, but obviously that's tough for anyone to deal with. Last year, Kenny coming in, hoping he'd win the Supercross title, going into Salt Lake with it in his grasp, certainly in the hunt at least, and then his health goes away from him again. So he decides to have a full reset, not race outdoors. It was mentioned on television by Will Christian, the pit reporter, that Kenny has gone to see a mental coach, and you could see it. You could see Kenny no longer being the, I don't care what goes on, I'll tackle it head-on guy to, I'm just going to try to not let stuff bother me. I'm just going to try to enjoy it and have a good time regardless. I say the difference between staring the issue in the face and saying, I can handle it, to more sidestepping and saying, yeah, it's there. I'm just going to try to let it not bother me. So that was immediately put to the test because the penalty, he was super bummed at round 2, and then even more mad at round 3. Can he use this mental fortitude he has developed, this ability to take whatever obstacle is thrown his way, and instead of trying to face it, just trying to move on, put it to the side, pretend it didn't happen? He's going to need to do that because anyone at his level of ambition, anyone who's trying to be the champion of their sport, the 10 points is just going to rip a hole through him, and it's going to be really frustrating. And I know that we try to operate with the cliche of, oh, this athlete's going to be so fired up and angry. It doesn't always result in better performances. A lot of times when they just, again, move on, pretend it didn't happen, stay relaxed, enjoy the race day, instead of being pissed off and angry. A lot of times they perform better that way. I know that sounds crazy, but that's often how it works. So it's a real test for Ken right now on the mental side, and we haven't seen any hints of the physical issues yet. That new bike has been good, as mentioned, but we do head into new turf. I'd be super bummed if you're Roczen to say, I was better than Webb, significantly better the first two, and I passed him and I should have beat him at round 3, and I'm 1 point ahead. That's got to be frustrating. And we know there's big history between these two. They've apparently squashed it, or they don't talk about it publicly. They kind of pretend that there isn't. But, it's got to bum Roczen out. So we're waiting on Tomac to see if he can get up there. And the fourth man to me right now is Barcia. We've seen signs from everyone else, but Barcia consistently over the 3 races has shown that he's as good as anyone. He's not the points leader any longer, but you could argue that he's ridden just as well, performed just as well as Roczen at these first 3. And I think the starts will average out where he'll get more good ones than bad. He actually ended up with 2 bad starts and 1 good one in Houston. But I think it'll go the other way when you average out the season. That 2/3 of the races he'll end up having good starts. And Barcia can fight like hell. So if he's up there off the start, it is going to be interesting because he is fired up right now. And he was riding awesome at round 3. This is not he's an Anaheim 1 specialist and the rest of the year is going to be junk. This is impressive what Barcia has done. Everybody else, you're still learning the ropes, and that is the consistency in the 450 class is so hard to come by. You look at Chase Sexton and how it went. It is almost on script. It is almost identical. It is amazing how it works out this way so often for these rookies. They are unbelievably fast, and within a few weeks, they take a huge hit, and then the rest of their season spirals in the wrong way. We'll see how quickly Chase can get back. Supposedly doesn't have any broken bones. They were worried about a broken shoulder blade. That wasn't the case. But, I mean, look, so many times these rookies come out, they're unbelievably fast, and they wad up quickly. I go all the way back to Damon Bradshaw in 1990. He actually won the first 2 races of the season at 17 years old in the Premier class, was leading round 3, crashed. Rest of the season was mixed. Still won some races, but not the same as it was those first 2 rounds. Seeing Cerullo almost winning the opener last year. And then he made it to basically Glendale before he had the big crash. And then another crash and another crash. It was really bad at Salt Lake. James Stewart, round 1 of his rookie season was a mud race. We got to round 2. He crashed out of practice, broke his arm. just these guys come in here with so much speed and so much ability, and it just usually doesn't last through 17 rounds. But what you often get is the first rounds are amazing. And for Sexton, the fast qualifying times, the heat race win, he's pulling away in that main. And shout out to our man Kellen Brower here at Racer X, because he went and looked at the footage from Houston 2. And the reason Sexton crashed in the sand is because Cianciarulo crashed 2 laps earlier. He knifed the front wheel. He put a big hole at the top of the berm. And then Sexton comes around, rides the top of the berm. His rear tire hits that hole, bounces out of the berm, and then the bike goes flying, and he has a high side, and the rest is history. But no one else went flying like that. I don't know what it is. There's just something about the way those rookies, they have 0 speed limit. And it's not like if you see Webb or Roxon or Anderson or Marvin, guys that have won a lot of races in this championship, Webb before. It's not like when you watch them, it looks like they're holding back. It looks like they're riding 100%. But there's got to be this intangible 101% that the rookies just haven't learned to manage. And this is 252-stroke days. This is 454-stroke days. The challenge is, here's what often happens, right? Eventually, the rookie figures it out. They figure out how to do 17 rounds. They figure out how to not crash. And then we all say, yeah, but where's the crazy speed? Where's the crazy speed? It's almost like you just can't have both, right? It's probably the simplest equation ever. You can't go 4% faster than the fastest 450 Supercross riders in the world and be consistent. So you're going to get one or the other with most of these guys. It's just how it has to be. Cianciarulo is starting to deliver that now. That crash in the sand, that was costly. He could have won that race. And then rounds 1 and 3, he was exactly what you want. He was that next step, that not spectacularly fast, but just solid. He had a 4th and a 3rd. He could be the points leader. He could be right there with Roxon, if not for that crash in the sand at round 2. But you are seeing Adam make steps toward that. Not the fastest guy on the track every single time they're on the track, but able to have good, solid finishes. And at the beginning of the Houston 3 main, here was a critical moment. Webb gets a good start, but we had not seen much speed from Webb to start the year. There was no reason for these riders to think, oh, he's back just because he got a start, because he was okay only at the first 2 rounds. So the first lap of round 3, we don't know. Roxon quickly goes by Webb, and then Cianciarulo is right there, and Cianciarulo starts gaining on Webb in the whoops. And I'm sure at that moment, Cianciarulo's thinking, okay, I've probably been faster than Coop so far this year. I'm really good at the whoops, and I'll just make it happen. But Adam was running the extreme right side of the whoops, and the bike started swapping just a little, and he was so close to getting into those tough blocks, and his night could have been over, his season could have been over. He survived that, and then I never quite saw that level again the rest of the night, and then Webb slowly was able to pull away. But that's good. That's good. I mean, you saw Adam nearly going on his head, and he pulled out of it, and he saved it, and he got a 3rd. My gosh, that's what you want. Again, marrying the crazy speed with the consistency, difficult to do. You've just got to pick your battles, and he picked this night battle to be on the podium. I'm very encouraged. The thing you worry about is when you don't see the progress. Getting it absolutely perfect, difficult, but at least you can see lessons being learned and applied. And also, Adam admitted he didn't have the offseason that he wanted, so he's almost above par from what he expected coming in. He said he was really nervous coming into this championship, and now I get to have a bone to pick with some of these riders. First, Adam, who's very forthcoming. He said that he had arm issues, that he's working through a couple surgeries to try to get his arm and wrist and hand to feel right. It's actually a nerve problem in his elbow that's causing that. He didn't hide the injury, but he didn't admit how nervous he really was about round 1 until after round 3. Okay, so that's Adam. He's feeling better. Cooper Webb, I talked to him in October. We talked to Cooper Webb with a bunch of riders a week before the first race, and Cooper's like, oh, it's great. We don't have a new bike this year. We don't have to worry about testing. We'll be dialed. Meanwhile, what we don't know is KTM is using this air shock, and Webb lost valuable testing time close to the season because of the back problem. We now know that everything Webb was saying about being ready and 100%, and thankfully I'm on the same old bike, was not true. Was not true. And then the first 2 rounds, when Webb is struggling, we're like, what is wrong with the guy? Because we didn't know there were any problems. Now we know. Now the 9th and the 4th, totally fine, totally acceptable. So now that the riders have revealed the truth, which for some reason they don't, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's... Here's my guess. My guess is Webb misses some time. He's trying to figure out this new shock, but there's no reason to get into that before the race, because what if he just goes out and wins round 1? What if the setting happens to work and he surprises himself? So I think that's the goal, to at least take a chance that everything's going to go so well that you don't need to reveal that there was a problem. Probably doesn't work out very often. I just don't know why these dudes keep this stuff secret. I know it's a mental game. They don't want to give the competition an edge. But we are so far past the only guys that can win are Stu, Reed, and Carmichael days, or RV Dunge days, or whatever. We're so far past that. No one's confidence is going up because one guy said that he's not quite dialed in. Because this time of year, you got to battle 11 guys, 12 guys. If Marvin Musgang gets a whole shot, he can win. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many guys that can win right now. I just think it's overrated to play this mental game. So interesting to hear from those guys, and now hear that they admitted that the offseason wasn't what they wanted. You got to be pumped on Adam. It is progress, and he didn't expect to be 100% yet, so he might get better as the season goes on. It's impressive. But right now I'm going with Roxon and Barsha and Webb. They've been the best guys. Webb only because I think he has to fix now, and you can just take those first 2 races out. Tomac got the race win, but I think he'd like to see a little more in the other 2 races. Then Cian Cerullo, same thing, learning lessons. I mean, look, he wasn't fast enough in the mains to win any of these races, so I can't put him ahead of any of these other guys who have won, but there's progress there. And then everyone else, so many wild cards, so many opportunities to be in it. I am very intrigued by Dylan Ferrandis. Very, very. Now, a friend of mine did text me and said, hey, do you think these rounds where Ferrandis showed some signs, Malcolm showed some signs, Plessinger showed some signs, they look good? Is that an indicator that indeed Monster Energy Star Racing Yamaha 450 team has a secret sauce that the regular Yamaha factory 450 team from years past did not have? Is this an indicator that Star's got it going on with that bike? Or is this soft, tacky dirt? And remember, it was the hard pack tracks that really threw the Yamaha 450 for a loop the past few years. Except for Chad Reed, he was the opposite. But that's kind of the way Chad is. Even Webb's days, 17 and 18 on the Yamaha. If it was muddy or if it was rutted, all of a sudden Cooper Webb started riding well. If the track was hard and dry, forget about it. So we won't know yet, but the good news for the Yamaha guys is we don't have a lot of tracks that are going to be that way. Indy will probably be ruddier than Houston. And then we go to Orlando, and then we go to Daytona. See what I'm saying? Maybe Dallas and Salt Lake. But when you have a very much Eastern-based championship, that's probably going to help those guys. But it's a question worth asking. The Dylan Ferrandis that we saw at round 2 can run with anyone. That was his second 450 race. He's coming back from an injury. It was impressive. And I think it was impressive not in the same way as those rookies that I mentioned who are balls fast but crash out. That just seemed like Ferrandis just did it. It wasn't he did it because he was going 2% over the edge compared to everyone else and not to learn where that edge is. That looked solid. And one thing Ferrandis has always been good in, whoops, but specifically when the whoops get really beat late in the race, he can almost always blitz. We've really seen the last few years with the 20-minute mains and the earth movers that are 450s that whoops, they're not usually skimmers all the way to the end. But Ferrandis, he has a different technique in the whoops. He's a little further back, and I feel he can control the back of the bike a little bit better. I can't quite describe what I'm seeing, but I feel like the way he squats, I feel like he has a little more control over the rear of the bike. Everybody else, you're so worried about that front wheel. It's got to get on top of those whoops. And it's like he's got that so dialed that he can worry more about the rear. This is me being Gary Bailey or David Villeman here. I could be completely off. But to me, there's something about his technique where it's not just fast, but it's even when the whoops are cupped out or have edges, he can keep the bike held in line. And that really applied in those whoops at round 2. It's not going to apply on every track. It's not. So maybe that magic that he had at round 2, you're not going to see it again, or maybe not that often. But it just speaks to, I think he is not a crasher. I know he was back in the day. He had some major injuries earlier in his career, Ferrandis, but he has said a lot of that was because he was used to trying to match pace with Jeffrey Hurlings, and that teaches you to ride way over the limit. And the last couple of years, he's actually been pretty solid here, Ferrandis. So I think it's not him looking good at round 2 is not quite a Sexton thing where it's like, yeah, but it's just a matter of time until he goes down. Now, you do see with the performance at round 3, he was never that comfortable. He didn't get a good start and didn't come through like he did at round 2. It's just going to be tough because Ferrandis has never been a good starter. And in the 250s, he was just so good, it didn't matter. But that's not going to work in the 450 class. He's going to have to get the starts figured out because he came from like 14th to 2nd at round 2. But I don't care who you are, you're not doing that on a week-to-week basis in this field. And also, even if you don't ride over the edge, just putting yourself there 8th or 10th early on, there's a chance you're just going to get knocked down by incidents that aren't even your fault. So really impressed with what I've seen from Ferrandis. It's scary good what he did at round 2, but I don't know if this could go either direction. Either, oh my gosh, a couple rounds in, he's winning races, and you're like, dude, Ferrandis is good. Or we're like, man, why are we not seeing that Houston 2 magic again? And I think a little bit of that is the starts. That could be a shame because he's definitely got the pace to run up there. Another guy to talk about is Osborne. It has been a great start to the season and a terrible one all at once. Everyone does their work at the test track. Everyone hopes that when they show up for the first couple of races that what they've done is right. They don't ever know for sure if their speed is there. And that even includes, yes, guys like Osborne who ride at the Baker's factory. Yes, they get to ride with fast guys. In his case, he gets to ride with Marvin, for example, and Coop. But still, they're all nervous before round 1 because they never know for sure how good they're going to be. So the great news for Zacho is he now knows he's fast. He's really good. He even overcame massive crash on press day for round 1 to come from behind and win a heat race at round 1. He looked great in the main, lap time-wise. Round 2, running down Tomac, looked great in the main, lap time-wise. But his starts have been bad. He's had crashes at the wrong times, and now he's 10-10-9. I have to agree with Mathis, as much as it pains me to say it. It's got to be the fastest anyone has ever been who goes 10-10-9 at the first 3 rounds. And that is a pile of points he's handed over. After round 2, I thought it didn't matter because I'm like, the field's deep. They're stealing points from each other. He'll get his. But 3 races, 10-10-9, he's pretty far back already. That's going to be a decent chunk to make up. And if you're Osborne, again, you look at the web thing and you're like, what? I was definitely better than him at the first 2 rounds. And I was at least as good as him, Zach would like to think, at round 3. He just got a better start. And for that, he's way ahead of me in points. I'm just as good, if not better, and he's ahead of me in points. That has got to be super frustrating for Zacho. But speed, elite speed, like I can be the fastest guy in the track in the 450 class in Supercross speed, that is literally worth millions of dollars. It is the most elusive thing out there, and Zach now knows for sure that he has it, so that's saying a lot. His teammate, Jason Anderson, it is very odd. If you look on paper, the 15th, that was arm pump at round 1, 8-8 the next 2, that seems okay, but it has not been inspired. It does not look the same. The awesome Jason Anderson style that everyone admires and loves just doesn't seem there to be there. Yeah, I don't know. His style seems different. I was watching him go through the rhythm lane in front of where we were in the press box on Saturday at round 3, and I'm just like, is that Anderson? I mean, I know it's number 21 on a Rockstar Energy Husqvarna, but that does not look like Anderson to me. I don't think he wears the red gear very often. He had red gear, but I don't think it was just the red gear. It just doesn't look like he has the same style. Now we go to the third rider on the Rockstar Husky team, and that's Dean Wilson. I think it's been discussed already quite a bit by now. The disgust over him not getting out of the way. It was the strangest deal. As they came down that start stretch with Roxon right behind Wilson, Wilson was on the right. The inside line was open, and it looked like Roxon was just going to go by. And then Dean move back to cover the inside. And at that point, you look and you do not see any other riders a lap down anywhere near him. So it makes it seem even worse. Like, how do you not know that's the leaders behind you? You're riding all by yourself. Once I got to go back and analyze things, it wasn't quite that simple. He actually got around Ferrandis when Ferrandis crashed. You didn't see it on TV, but Ferrandis flipped off of those two tabletops, and there's a left-hand turn. It's really hard to get the hop off that last table and over the last two jumps. Ferrandis ended up upside down on the tough blocks. By the time he gets up, he's right behind Wilson, and he was close. He was charging. He was behind Wilson, but then when he got caught by Roczen and Webb, he moved over, and then Roczen and Webb were in the exact same spot Ferrandis was, which is right behind Wilson. And I guess Wilson is just doing what he's supposed to do. Don't look back. Don't give up the position. What's also interesting is, yes, Wilson was about to become a lapped rider, and that's not a compliment. No one wants to be lapped. But he was fighting for, as he said, 11th place, and the guy behind him was Ferrandis, who got second at the previous week, and the guy in front of him was Justin Brayton, who got third the previous week. So he's battling with some good dudes. And Dean Wilson was fit enough and fresh enough. This is crazy. When Webb makes the block pass on Roczen for the lead, that slows them up so much that Wilson pulls back away, and they never got to him. They closed back in, but they didn't get right to his rear wheel. So Dean, 29 laps or whatever it was into the main, he was still strong. You could maybe go back to a time in Supercross history, but 11th or 12th, the guys aren't charging at the end. But again, you've got Dylan Ferrandis, Justin Brayton, Marvin Musquin right around those positions, and those are proven podium guys. All three of them had podiums in the first three rounds this season. So that shows how well Dean was riding, even though he was being lapped. There is a lot more parity in the game than there used to be. That I am sure of. What I am unsure of is it parity all the way at the top. Will this just be where the 4th through 12th positions, for example, are hotly contested all year long and throw a blanket over them or flip a coin to figure out who's the best out of that group? 4 through 12? Or is it 1 through 12? And I know it's just one race, but to me it's alarming when Cooper Webb puts it together the way he does. It's the exact way Cooper Webb normally does it, and a strong and ready and well-positioned, feeling good on the bike Cooper Webb is a dangerous thing for everyone else because, of course, we still will never know for sure if Roczen will be able to maintain the strength and health all year long, and we have not seen the normal Eli Tomac, and everybody else has to step up their game to beat Webb because Webb was better than all those guys 1 year ago. I'm not going to say he's the title favorite right now, I mean, based on 2 bad races and 1, but it's trending much better in his direction. Obviously, a pivotal round coming up this weekend. If Roczen can get a win, that'd be big. Or if Barcia can get a win, I think he really needs that because Barcia is hot right now. He's riding well. And I think for his confidence and to serve notice for everyone else that he's a bad dude and a force to be reckoned with for this title, he's got to finally back up one of those round 1 wins fairly quickly. And I could completely and totally see Barcia winning on Saturday and doing that. That's the 450s. There's much more I could talk about, but somehow I've gone on a 36-minute monologue here. 250 class, that was unfortunate to lose guys so quickly. The Forkner thing, that's a whole separate story. I wrote about the 250 class as going through a real generational shift. I wrote about this back in November. It was the thing for so long to sign these hotshot amateurs because for the most part it was always working out, and if you didn't get them, there was no way you were going to beat them. And it's just not the case anymore. It doesn't matter who you are. That class and this sport can chew you up and spit you out. And when riders have ups and downs like that, there's 2 things that happen. A, the team that didn't sign the hot shot could still end up being the team that wins with somebody else. You know, it's not like the old days where it's like, well, they got Stewart, they got Carmichael, they got Reed, they got Villapoto, they got Dunge. What are we going to do? How are we going to beat those guys? There's a lot wider group of riders that are capable of winning. That's A. And B, if some of these guys who you thought were going to be untouchable struggle, sometimes they end up on other brands. And Eli Tomac was not raised a Kawasaki guy, but he did the winning in the big classes for Kawasaki. And Cooper Webb was not raised a KTM guy. He won his big 450 title for KTM. Ken Roczen has been bouncing around all over the map. Zach Osborne. I mean, anyone could have had him at any time. No one could have predicted that this type of success was coming. But Husky gets to reap the reward of that. So with the field having more parity, it gets that much harder for teams to figure out who to hire and who's going to really be the best of the group. And you're seeing it reflected in the 250 class because this world should have been Austin Forkner's for the last couple of years. And it got messed up again. And it's not that far removed from what we saw from Cian Cerullo. He's back on his horse now. Cian Cerullo's good. He can win a 450 races for Cowie, the brand he grew up with. But it was touch and go for a while. And for sure, there was several years where other teams were like, yeah, well, I'm glad I didn't was spending money on that guy because he's barely racing, right? So for Forkner, it seemed we thought he'd be a title contender in Supercross his very first year. That was a little early. The next year he battled Osborne a bit. The next year he was dominating, got hurt. Last year, Ferrandis was better in general, but late in the season, Forkner was just as good as Ferrandis, and that's saying a lot because Ferrandis is obviously really good in the 250 class. Just a bummer that it went this way for Forkner, and I think it just makes all the teams' jobs harder to figure out what amateur kid to sink their money into because you can't just use the old model. It might work. You might get the next guy. I heard several people say, oh, don't tell Cowie this. They got Jet Reynolds coming up, and they got Ryder D coming up. We're racing when it's time. It's true, and it might work out for those guys. But I'm just looking at the track record here. Since Villapoto going straight from Team Green to winning everything, that model has not worked. The Dunge thing, they didn't get him when he was really young as an amateur, but he did stay loyal to the Roger DeCoster teams, whatever brand they were on, Suzuki and KTM, the whole time. That is not working out. No one has had it go that smoothly. So Forkner just backs that up, just circumstances with injuries, but it hasn't gone to plan. And that doesn't mean that he couldn't come back next year and finally get this title and be okay on a 450. Kind of similar to the way it worked out for Cian Cerullo, but that's a big shakeup. And look at this. It puts guys like Christian Craig and Colt Nichols in control of this championship. It wasn't like anyone was saying years ago that these were the guys, but they're putting it together. Nichols, sneaky good. The guy has had some big injuries. He often comes into the Supercross championship and gets a podium early in the year when he had barely been back on the bike. We do not have a lot of data on how good Nichols can be with a healthy offseason. He had that this time. He's been very good. Craig is definitely a different rider, much more consistent than before. RJ Hampshire should be out with an injury, at least missed a round, and had some issues at the other one. So title-wise, it's pretty much over for him, which leads us to one man, the Jet. Much like Ferrandis doing so well at round 2, or much like Chase Sexton being so fast, it is scary to see that. It's scary because it's like, man, if this dude is putting it together, is he just going to win everything? And is it just going to be hopeless for everyone else? Well, no, it's not quite that level. Terrible start for Jet, and also a big crash in the whoop. So it wasn't his night at round 3. But this is the kind of progress that you wanted to see. He is much better than last year. And although most years the riders are who they are, and what you get is what you always got, when you're that young in the development stage, like Jet is, there is always that chance that in one season the next he's going to get 20% better. And I think we've already seen it. Because we talked so much about that Anaheim 2 race last year where Jet almost won. And he was pretty good at St. Louis last year. He was pretty good, actually, an underrated ride, round 2. But the Salt Lake City rides, they weren't anything spectacular at all. And, hey, he almost won Anaheim 2. He had a giant lead, and Ferrandis tracked him down. I don't think there was a time last year where anyone said, is Jet the best 250 Supercross rider that there is? I mean, it would be hard to argue against it at round 2 this year. I think he was for that one night. So that's a big step. I'm just more concerned with the depth of this class. Although, I don't know. Maybe Hampshire and Forkner are back sooner than you think. Ended up being a collarbone for Forkner, and you know these dudes like to try to rush back from those. When you see shoulder injury, it's both bad, but also those seem to be the ones that the guys try to come back early from, so we'll see. Title-wise, I would have to think this race is run, but man, Forkner's got to be bummed. He's missed a lot of races the last couple of years, and he did not want this to happen. And he had a little drama. He took Hampshire out at round 2, so any of the is Forkner more mature now questions, well, they didn't get answered the right way. So he has a lot to prove. So there it is, folks. That is my take on these early 3 rounds. It was really fun to be on Supercross Island. It was wall-to-wall Supercross info every day. I mean, we had press conferences every day, calling people on the phone and getting the scoop and the gossip. It was all Supercross all the time, which is super awesome and fun, and I'm sure that sounds like a dream scenario to you. But as a journalist who wants to have these conversations, it would have been great to ask about the air shock and the web bike and the back injury and seeing Cirillo's off-season situation. And we believe that Cowie found a test track. I think they went to Three Palms and rode their Supercross track to ride. But you can't really get real answers, especially with these injuries, man. You can't get answers. It's so much easier to walk up to the tent and ask somebody. We're not allowed to do that now. So it was not ideal, but at the same time, we would have never had a situation with 3 Supercrosses in one city, which was kind of neat, even if it wasn't perfect. So I'm not going to complain too much. The weirdo situation led to a weirdo situation that one small part of it wasn't that bad. And we're headed to Indy. I'm at least going to the Saturday race in Indy. I might call it quits on the travel after that because, again, I can do just as much at home on my phone. Sorry to say. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thoughts on the first 3 rounds. Thanks to Yoshimura. Go to yoshimura-rd.com. Check out the RS12 exhaust system. They've got it for a variety of machines now, variety of brands, not just the Hondas, not just the Suzukis, but they do look good with the red number plate right alongside on Roxon's bike. We'll see you at Indy. Don't forget, we have a live show if you want to come to the Irving Theater, Indianapolis, Friday night. Hang out with myself and JT from a social distance, and we'll make jokes and make fun of you, make fun of ourselves, and talk about the first 3 rounds in person. We'll see you there. Go to the pulpamex.com site. Oh, pains me to say that. And there's ticket info there.